We are so excited for Maria to be joining us today. So Maria Abrar, she is a senior data scientist at Trulioo. As we have gone through the day, we've dug in deeply into customer tracking, optimization of marketing tactics based off customer lifetime value, even writing some code in R. And now Maria is going to do a presentation on data science and customer lifecycle journey. So if you have any questions as Maria is going through, please drop them in the Q&A. I'm going to aggregate them and we'll do them at the end. So Maria, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and I will hand the controls over to you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here, and hopefully everyone can learn something from me too today. Can you see my screen?
Yes, that is perfect. Thank you. Perfect. I'll turn my camera off. Have fun.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Maria. Thank you, Jenny, for the introduction. So I am a senior data scientist based in Vancouver, originally from Pakistan. I have been working in analytics, campaign management, also a little bit of software development for the past 12 years. Today in this session, I'm going to cover how data science can help in the customer lifecycle journey. I'm also going to make sure that I'm not getting too much into the technical details like the models, what are the best practices in Python or R. I am going to focus majorly on what are the best approaches, the best steps we can take to make sure that the data science approach is in the best practice, and also how can we achieve that in not only in a B2C market, but also in a B2B market as well. So even if you're coming from a different background like retail, telecommunications, or software as a service company, you will for sure get something out of this. Okay, so introducing, we can basically split up a complete customer lifecycle journey into 3 major steps. The first is attract, then engage, and then retain. Basically, so what happens is that attraction is where you are identifying who your next customer is going to be. And that person needs to be engaged or attracted in the right way. So what needs to be done here is you need to make sure that the customer needs to know exactly what the product can give, how it can add value to the customer. For example, if it's a software as a service, then how can that service help the customer in his business, in his daily day-to-day activities? How do we actually reach the customer and then make sure that the customer is acquired and the customer, from the lead to opportunity to a new account cycle, that successfully gets done. So there is a 100% conversion rate. If it's a normal customer, for example, from a telecommunication, or you're coming from a retail background, so how do we make sure that someone who has absolutely not spent anything on your product or on any of your clothing in a retail or a new shoe, how do you make sure that the customer actually becomes more frequent in your store or your website? So this step is important for all backgrounds, for all domains. Next is the engagement part. Engagement is now that the customer is successfully part of your base. The customer is now aware of your product. The customer has actually used your product for quite some time. So now this is the tricky part where you have to make sure the customer gets engaged and make sure that the customer keeps on coming back, keeps on spending more, and adds more value. So this is where you can, already you have a lot of information about the customer, the spends, the behavior patterns, likes, dislikes. Based on that, you can identify the next step, make sure that the customer moves from a lower value segment to a higher value segment and actually grows instead of going back, in the dormant phase. The last step, which is the retention step, this is the most important one. At this point, the customer decides that the customer is going to stay as the customer, or the customer goes back, goes dormant. What are the best practices? How can we make sure that the customer retains in the base? Make sure that the customer is at its peak level of spending. The customer is getting exactly what he signed up for, be it a product or the retail. And it also makes sure that the customer, if going towards dormancy, then we are having a very, very strict proactive strategy in place to make sure that the customer comes back, revives. So all of these steps in the coming slides, I'm going to go through them, each one of them, and then identify some of the models I've built in past or some of the projects that we have done throughout my experience, and ensuring how we can use data science in achieving these goals. So attract and acquire. Attract and acquire, the first part is to choose the customer. How do we choose the customer? So at this point, if you're sitting in a B2B company, you already have your leads and you need to make sure that the customer moves from a lead to and converted into account, or if it's, if you're working coming from a retail background and you want the customer, if the customer is coming on your website and identifying it's a completely new customer and he wants to know what he actually wants to buy. And since in these COVID times, we have seen a very high increase in the spend pattern through our digital platforms. So this is a very useful use case in there. What happens is that when a customer comes on board, you can actually cross-reference that new customer to your existing customer base. So based on your existing customer base, you can build an audience modeling model where what happens is that the existing customer has already a behavior pattern, a spend pattern. You might categorize them based on, so these are the kind of customers who are more into, if it's shoes, what kind of shoes, what are their spend patterns, versus you have also another kind of customer who is into more of sales, the clearance section. So you can basically map the new customer based on these existing customers and then recommend the next page or recommend a path of that website streaming to that specific customer. So this not only gives the customer a very personalized experience, but it also makes sure that the customer is satisfied with the overall experience. The exact same approach can be applied if you are pitching a software as a service, where, for example, you know exactly by now, you can hand out customer surveys and you can identify what exactly your customer needs. And then you can also map that with the existing businesses which are operating as your customers in your company. And you can say that these are the customers who are already using our product, and these are the best configurations or the best way they're using the product. And you can use the exact same technique to engage your new customer. Because at this point in time, you do not have the spend pattern or you do not have the behavior pattern of your new customer. But what you do have is the existing customers and a lot huge information about your existing customers. All you need to do is map it based on your audience modeling. The next step is to target them with the right offer. This is super important in the sense because maybe your customer is not looking for what is exactly being given to him in that personalized, offer or that customer service. So it's very important to listen to the customer here, and then based on that, give him the next best offer based on what the customer actually needs. How to do that? So one thing which has helped me a lot throughout my career and with the teams I've been working with too is the segmentation. There are a lot of segmentation which you can run. They're also known as clustering, where basically what happens is that you divide the whole base into homogeneous clusters. So any group of customers exhibiting similar behaviors, they get clubbed into one cluster, and then you can treat that one cluster as one micro segment. This is also a very contextual marketing approach where you are giving one specific offer to that specific micro segment based on the kind of customers clubbed in. So segmentation can be divided into different streams based on high value, low value. I'll touch that later on in the slides as well. At this point, since the customer is a new sale, you need to wait for a few weeks, days, or maybe 1 or 2 months based on the background you're coming from. And based on that, you can basically split your new customer base into specific segments. So new segments, every segment is automatically one cluster or 2 clusters. And based on that cluster, you can identify what exactly the customer needs and then target those specific customers in those specific clusters based on the past few months, few days, whatever your new sale duration would be, accordingly based on what they're doing in that specific customers. This is also a very good technique because I've seen that in my experience as well. You cannot attack every single customer with one offer. It's always the best practice to use a segmented, broken down approach, because in that sense, you always have the best uptakes. The customer is going to respond more positively to your campaigns or to your initiatives or even to your offer. Another thing which can be catered into this is the kind of customer. For example, if you're working with a B2B company, if it's an SMB or an enterprise, you can also give them, customized products based on the kind of background the customer is coming from. So at this point, you need to understand as much as you can about the customer, because at this point, the customer has not generated enough in activities, on your using your product, but you can know a lot about where the customer is coming from and why exactly did the customer choose your product. Another very good use case is the product affinities. Product affinities is basically something which I will also be discussing throughout the slides as well. At this point, product affinity is being used for new opportunities. These are intelligent recommendations based on, there are many different algorithms available, a priori, and then you can also use neural networks. So basically what you can do is that you can identify existing behaviors, and then based on the existing customers and their behaviors, you can map the next best opportunity or the next best product for that customer. It's very similar to segmentation. You can also layer them up together, like identifying your clusters, and then based on every cluster, you can add a layer of your product affinity on top. So this also helps in identifying the right product for that specific cluster. I personally am a big fan of this because even as a business owner, you do not really have the information of what the best product is. You can always map product affinity on top, and then the affinities are going to give you the next product based on what the existing customers are doing and what your new customer is actually doing at the base right now. So the first N days of activity, N is basically based on completely relevant to your domain. A retail company might have a different N days of activity. By N days, I mean the total number of days you mark a customer as a new sale before you move it to the next segment. So the best approach is to make sure that once you know what the value of N is, for example, in some companies, it might be 90 days. For some companies, it might be 2 weeks. For some companies, it might be 6 weeks. Do you want to treat your customer as a new sale customer for the next 6 weeks or 3 months? Based on the N sales, you can update your affinities very frequently. Obviously, it depends upon the kind of infrastructure you have, but the best way to do it is to update them as frequently as possible, because a new sale customer is the most active and showing the most dynamic behavior change versus the next two segments I'm going to talk about. So it's very critical here to keep on updating your product affinities. And every month, a customer might change from one segment to the other, be it segmentation or be even in the product affinity stage. So last month, the customer might, the next best offer might be, offer A or campaign A. But in the next month, based on the last 30 days activity, the change will be huge, and you'll actually see the dynamic shift of a customer behavior based on what you've been doing in the past 1 month. Based on the offers, you'll also see cluster movement. So when you're converting a new sale from, I'm relatively new, I've just been using the product for 1 week versus I've been using for 3 months or 2 months, you're going to see a very distinctive change. This change can be increase in usage. This change can also be a decrease in usage, which automatically decreases revenue, decrease in engagement, increase in engagement. So these changes need to be tracked very regularly in the first 3 months. And again, it's super important because the customer is being dynamic. The customer doesn't exactly know what is the best way to use the product. So it's always important to make sure that these models, new sales and affinity, are being updated very frequently. One of my favorite models to be used in new sale is the quality of sales. So in a previous presentation, he was talking about random forest and how we can use random forest. So we've used random forest a lot, and one of the best use cases of random forest was to use in the quality of sales model, because I was an organization where we had to identify a good quality sale versus a bad quality of sale, because of which a commission structure was created and commission needs to be discharged. So initially it was just one hard-coded value, if the customer is doing X, Y, Z activities, we mark it as a good sale versus a bad sale. But we replaced that with a very good quality of sales model, which basically monitored customer activity, and within a 7 days window, it based on the random forest outputs, it used to give that these are the customers who are actually a good quality sale versus these are the customers which are a bad quality of sales. And this can be helped in used in your commission structure. This can be used in the overall sale process and identifying what exactly needs to be done to make sure that there is a 100% conversion rate, or to make sure that if you are selling your product to one specific customer and it's not a business, make sure that you're making that sale to a future high value customer. The next is the engage and grow. So engage and grow is the most critical part based at this point in time, the customer is already using your product. The customer has already generated a lot of data where you can on top apply a lot of business methodologies. You can identify exactly who the customer is, what the customer wants from your product. And at this point in time, there are two things that needs to be done: engage the customer more, and then identifying growth potential. So how do we understand the customer? Again, this is another leg of the segmentation. At this point, you already know that the customer is no longer part of the new sale. The customer is already part of the base for some specific time period, which you've already set, like the end set I was talking about. So what you can do is split it into two kinds of segmentation. One is the user segmentation and the other is the lifecycle segmentation. By lifecycle segmentation, this is specifically can be generated for those subscribers or those customers or those businesses who've been in the engaged part of your customer lifecycle. And then you can split that into further streams. For example, if you're talking about a telecommunication, I've had a lot of experience in that where we have customers who are mostly data savvy. They only use your connections for a good quality of internet, but there are also customers who only use your MNO offers for texting or voice offers. So there are different kind of customers. You can split up your customer base based on the type of usage, the type of products, and then further split them into segmentations. This not only helps you to go even more distinct, like even more clear and concise microsegments, but it also pinpoints exactly what the customer needs and reduces the error margin too. And then one of the things which this can be implemented across in any company is the customer profile 360. So what a customer profile 360 is that by this time, you know how much the customer spends on your product, you know how much the customer usage on your product. You also know how much the customer, how the customer is actually using the product. You can add in more psychographics and demographics variables on top based on the regions, based on the background the customer is coming from. Is the customer a student? Is the customer a teacher? Is the customer, a banker? Based on that, you can identify what's the best time to reach the customer, how do we reach the customer, and then get the best customer level support or experience the customer can get based on not only what the customer is doing using your product, but also pulling in all the psychographics or the demographics data as well. Product upsell is also a very good way to increase the customer from a low value product to a high value product. There are multiple high value propensity prediction models which can be built based on one or two or multiple use cases. For example, one of the business objectives which top of my mind is that currently your customer base are generating a revenue of let's assume $10 per day. But you know that these customers also show a potential, or this might be a target that you need to obviously increase your revenue. So what you can do is identifying set of subscribers, set of customers who are predicted to actually move towards a higher bundle or a higher product, a higher value product where you can generate more revenue. So you already have that prediction model in place. All you need is a very good offer on top, an offer which excites them, an offer which makes sure that they actually move towards the higher bundle. And based on that, they will actually give you an incremental value. You will not only move the needle, but you're also going to move them from giving them the more best experience, and it might be much better than what they're already using. This can be, for example, you just might have noticed, especially in the North American market, when you have a very big issue with your phone, you call the contact center, you tell them that I have connection issues, or maybe I just want to cancel my connection. They always have an extra package available to you, which might be of lower value, but they are going to give you some extra minutes or some extra MB to make sure that they retain you and make sure that you do not leave the network. They make sure that you stay on as a customer. So that's where upselling or downselling the product. Similarly, you can also apply a product lineage path, which is basically identifying monthly, weekly, or even daily prediction to identify forecast models. There are a lot of models available, forecast models based on the kind of data you have. You have a lot of hourly based data. You can apply specific model to that. You have region-wise data, you can apply a specific model to that, and you can build up a lot of forecast models which can tell you that this is what the customer is doing right now, and this is what the peak looks like in the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever your business objective is. This is super important when you are identifying, revenue potential. You want to identify the markets where currently in existing scenario, you do not see enough customers, but the forecast model will give you a very far predicted dates that these are the emerging markets, or these are the markets where if you invest more, you're going to generate a lot more revenue. So forecast models are something which are very easy to implement. You have a lot of variety. And then they not only help in the customer's overall experience, but it also helps in the overall company's growth as well. Value realization and expansion. So obviously, when you're sitting in a company where you need to make sure that your company's always making profit and you're not losing any customers, you need to be very sure of what exactly the customer lifetime value is. There are multiple different models available where you can identify the customer lifetime value, or you can identify the next best action, create a pricing and profit optimization model to make sure that if your customer is currently existing, in a smaller segment, but you see that the customer is showing a potential to move to a higher segment, you not only make sure that the customer moves to a higher segment, but this is where the account manager relationship comes in, and then a proper pricing strategy is in place. And this can be done by making a very perfect pricing and profit optimization model. One of the very good examples which I normally give here is, so everyone uses Instagram, everyone uses Netflix. So whenever you open up Netflix, it gives you a recommendation score at 96% relevant, and it pops up a new movie or a new series. So what's happening behind that is they have this a huge AI model, which is a product recommendation engine, which not only takes into account how much time you're spending on what category of movies. Like, for example, I love watching horror movies, so I always get more of, if there's a new horror movie, the trailer pops up and it shows me 98% relevant, because number one, I spend more time on Netflix watching those movies. Number two, anyone else who has the same profile as me is also watching those movies. So they're mapping my behavior with the other person's behavior, or that segment of clusters, that's the segment of customers, and then making sure that I am recommended the best next product. This hybrid approach has worked in so many organizations, that it becomes even much better if you're increasing engagement, if you're increasing revenue, if you're reducing churn. Because let's take Instagram. So how Instagram works is that every time you go on your Explorer field and you're looking into pictures or movies or anything on the Insta feed, it stores every single information which is being generated by your phone. For example, how much time does Maria actually spend on dog videos? How much time does Maria spend looking at a specific friend or a best friends group? How much time do I spend in actually messaging on Instagram? How many times do I spend liking? All that information is being stored and then is being utilized to make sure that every time I'm open Instagram, I'm only shown the relevant information. So why do I only see those pictures or those videos which are super interesting to me, and I spend more time? Because one, they are increasing the goal of engagement, and two, they also pinpoint those specific ads be it YouTube or Facebook. That's exactly how they're monetizing all of this, and that's how the whole model is running behind this. All you need is a business objective. So to increase that, you need a perfect recommendation engine. You can also apply a segmentation approach on top, because then, for example, instead of putting one big huge recommendation engine, my suggestion would be that split your base into, let's assume, SMB, enterprise, or high value, low value customers, and then a separate recommendation engine for a high value customer versus a separate recommendation engine for a low value customer. This is going to be more customer centric. This is going to be even more accurate, and then this is going to be add more value to your overall organization as well. Um, all of these models on individual, they do obviously give a lot of value, but one thing which I've learned is when you club them together, the output gets even much better, because it's not only a model in isolation. If you pick up a base and then apply segmentation, you might get 5 amazing clusters. And for every single cluster, if you have the infrastructure available, you can recommend specific streams based on those clusters on top. So, apply recommendation engine on top of these clusters, and then based on that, you'll be even getting a more better and a concise micro segment. The last is basically retention and revival. So retention and revival is the trickiest, the hardest of them all, because this is where you want to make sure that the customer stays at the top, the mature level which you've achieved by now, and the customer doesn't go into the declining phase, the dormant phase, or the churn phase. So need to be very proactive here, predict the decline. There are many different models available which can be done, and the model's aggressiveness can be defined based on the business objective. You can add dormancy churn prediction. For example, customers who are currently using your product, they are currently part of your network, they're currently part of your base, but they are predicted to go dormant because, number one, they might be in a region where there aren't too many marketing campaigns. Number two, they might be showing a decline based on their existing trends versus what they were showing in the previous months or weeks. So at that moment, they are currently part of the base, but it's very tricky to identify that they will actually go dormant. So, and dormancy prediction, churn prediction, this can be made multiple layers as well. For example, predicting subscribers who are going to stop using your product till the next week, 7 days, or customers who are going to stop using for the next 20 days, 30 days versus 90 days. So you can break up your base into 3 different categories, and for every single category, you can have a separate retention campaign available. So for example, if a customer is part of the top predicted bins in the next 7 days, you might have a very less aggressive campaign, but you need to put the customer back into the old usage pattern, which was a high value or more spend, versus a 90-day prediction where you're sure that the person is going to go towards a 90-day. You need to be even less aggressive because you still have 90 days to get the customer back, versus the 7-day, which the customer is going to be more urgently getting out of your base or stop using your product. So based on these levels, based on these, you can call them churn scores, you can mark them based on different churn level, churn scores, a spectrum where you have specific campaigns available or initiatives available to win back the customer. Another good use case here is to identify churn hubs using SNA and then apply MGM, member get member initiatives. So for example, I know this example because I've seen this happening with Instagram and Facebook as well. So if I stop using Facebook for a few days, I get this email from Facebook. And based on that email, it shows me some of my close friends, a recent post my close friend has made on Facebook, and tells me or makes me excited that, a friend of yours has posted this, go check it out. So how is that working? Facebook has my SNA. So Facebook knows that Maria interacts with these are my closest connections. Facebook also knows that Maria has decreased her activity in the past 3-4 days. So I am in a potential churn hub for them. But they also give me initiatives that, attract me back using my SNA. Member initiatives can also be applied similarly. For example, In a telecommunication world, we've done a lot of MDM initiatives where we know that Maria was talking to my best friend all of these like past few months, and I was constantly messaging her. She was constantly messaging me, so we were directly connected to each other in that social network analysis. But in that SNA map, suddenly my friend's phone turns off. The person goes dormant, might be sudden dormant, might be slow dormant. But based on that, I am going to get a campaign, an SMS or a campaign offer that I can, win something or maybe get something free, free GB, free minutes if I get my friend back on the network. And this way, my friend is going to get also a retention offer if you come back on the network. But since her phone is closed, they need me to contact her so that we both can win extra minutes or extra free GB just because you are dormant. And this has worked too because this work in those cases where the customer is already dormant and it's more of a reactive approach. But this is a good way to approach your customer if the customer phone is not working or if the customer is not reachable. Bring back customers of these. So now we've talked about how exactly to identify that these are the customers, but what are the best offers to, and how do we choose the best offers? That's where you can again use the product recommendation engine, but this product recommendation engine is only using the data of a dormant subscribers. So um, the recommendation engine, the logic, the methodology is the same, but every time I discuss it, I'm using it in a different segment on a different set of customers. So my output is going to be different this way. So in a product recommendation engine, it's the same example as the call center one. If the customer is already dormant or predicted to be dormant, you can upsell a product, you can downsell a product just to make sure that the customer sticks to your network, the customer sticks as your customer, and the customer doesn't go back. You can select the best low price offer. You can have win back offer. You call your internet providers and tell them that your internet isn't working, so you want to cut off the connection and go to a new internet provider. They will send you some person right there and then at your place just to make sure that it gets better and give you even more customized and a special service. That's how these works. Another thing is to identify new opportunities here, like using product recommendation or product affinity. You can say that a lot of customers who are existing showing propensity of something which, for example, if you go back to the Netflix example, I just saw a trailer of a new comedy show and I liked it, but Netflix doesn't know that I like it. But what Netflix does know is that the people in my cluster, the rest of the all of the customers, Netflix users in my cluster, they are also using going into that, that category too. So they are enjoying that one specific comedy show too. So Netflix will automatically recommend me a brand new product or a brand new thing, that this is something new for me and I might like it too because everyone else in my segment is liking it too. So you can use, again, you use the segmentation and product affinity for the new opportunities and then identify those new opportunities as well. This way you don't have to, identify exactly what to offer because the recommendation engine is going to tell you that these are the products which are being, enjoyed the most by similar group of customers or customers who are also at the same level, be it ARPU, usage, or spend. And then lastly, call center analytics. This is again, you can flag your churn customers or flag customers who are predicted to go dormant or flag customers who are very high value and have a very separate stream of high value, calls from the stream for them. So basically, whenever all these people call, they all have different experiences when they're calling or when they are, complaining about any offer or the product. So they get a very customized experience, which is going to make them feel special too and come back using your product too. Um, Another thing is the loyalty analysis. So basically, you can treat your customers with rewards or royalty based on the age they've been part of your, customer base or based on how much they've spent. So, for example, you give them targets that if you spend this amount of, money, you'll get this much discount on a shoe or a coat or anything retail wise. And the same goes for in a B2B market too, when you're talking about a customer and you say that if the customer stays with us and this is the amount of volume they generated, we're going to give them this much more discount based on the amount of volume. So the more they spend, the more discount they get. And even with the loyalty, you can give them loyalty discount as well, which are super useful too in retaining the customer. Even if the customer is at the maturity level and not going to go the dormant, it, it actually helps them to stay at the peak, of which is the maturity as well. So I've talked about a lot of models and how we can use them in the customer journey. All of these need to be have a very proper model evaluation, and the results need to be carefully refreshed and make sure that they are being used in the best possible way. I've worked with a lot of amazing data scientists who have produced amazing models and with a very high precision or accuracy, and everything looks perfect. But after 6 months, the model becomes void. The model is not being used the way it was supposed to be used. How do we make sure that the model gives the right quality of output and it's being used in the best possible way? So one of the things that we can do is to identify, how the customers are responding to the offers based on the model output, which is known as the response modeling. So it is a big feedback loop which we can implement. So if I give a customer an offer, like if you go back to the Netflix example, Netflix offers me a brand new comedy show. So that recommendation is coming from the product affinity, Netflix product affinity engine, whatever the AI is behind that. If I actually watch that show till the full extent, I actually spend the time allocated for that show to watch. That means that I qualified for that campaign. Based on that, they can then improve the model and then use my behavior to further retrain and refresh the model and provide even better outputs. And this can go the other way around. For example, if I do not go and watch that show, this might affect on the other way, that they are going to use that information and then tone it down in a way that they do not offer that show to other customers who have more similar behaviors than me, and maybe use this information to the model might actually extract me from one cluster and put me in another cluster as well. So this response modeling is super important, because once you close the whole feedback loop, you get to know exactly how exactly the model worked and was it successful or not. Another important thing is the campaign analytics. So you had an output, you identified the churn subscriber who was predicted to go dormant, and then you had the best offer available for him. You targeted the subscriber with the best customer, with the best offer. It was backed by marketing. It had a very positive business case. Everything was working fine. But how do we make sure that the customer actually retained back to the base, stayed back in the base because of what we did? And it was not something that happened in the base in the control. So it's very important to have a target control methodology. Based on this methodology, you can identify what is the incremental uptake. So control is a group of subscribers with exact similar behaviors, exact same market segment. It's the exact same, you can call them statistically significant too, because they have the right ARPU, right usage. They are from the same segment, but we do not offer them the whatever the campaign was. We only target the target group of subscribers, the target pool. And then after the campaign ends, you evaluate the uptake. So this is the uptake, how much the control actually did that specific business objective, like coming back to the base, not getting dormant, or maybe buy a new product, versus how much did the target for who we actually made an effort to pitch them that product, and how much did they basically went for it. So the target uptake versus the control uptake, if you just compare these together, you're going to get an incremental uptake. So the target and control uptake is almost the same. That means that our efforts did not work as much as we hoped it to, versus if the uptake is high, like even a 1 to 2% uptake based on your base, that means that we did something right. So it's very important to evaluate the campaign effectiveness, because it not only shows you how effective was the offer, but it also shows you how effective was your targeting, how effective was the micro segment, which you identified based on a segmentation, a prediction model, or affinity, or maybe an SNA. Real-time data is also super important, because this is the basic of any kind of data science model. You need to make sure that your information is as much recent as possible. So the recency might be different for some companies. It might be important for some, like in a B2B, it a recency might be 1 day or 2 day. But if you're talking about a customer where you have huge amount of volume of data being generated, like all these big major social platforms, recency needs to be very, very recent, like the last 1 second or the last 1 minute. But whatever information is being incorporated into your data pipeline, it needs to be perfect, 100% accurate. If the data is not recent, this accuracy decreases exponentially. The customer might not be, showing the exact same spending patterns which the customer was showing 1 week ago or 2 weeks ago. But your model is going to keep on making the same predictions because your data was not refreshed in the right way more frequently or as much as it was supposed to get refreshed from. And then the last is the democratization of data, where it's super important for everyone across the organization to see all numbers. And how it's that done is by real-time dashboards. So these real-time dashboards are these can be made by many open source tools, or you can actually pay for bigger, amazing, better tools too. But it's super important to make sure that across all the organization, everyone is looking at the same number. The data is consistent. It's available to every decision maker, be it marketing, be it the product team, be it the even the top management. Everyone needs to know the exact same number, and it needs to be one true picture. I've seen organizations where there are multiple dashboards, and every team is generating their own dashboard. So if it's a average revenue per user, one variable, it's a one number, but the same number can be calculated differently in a finance team, in a BI team, in marketing, which actually leads to many other different problems as well. So this number needs to be consistent. Every number needs to be consistent. It needs to be refreshed. And then every person in the organization, especially the decision makers, and decision makers do not need to be an CXO or a CMO. They need to be, they can be anyone in the department, and they need to have the full visibility of what's happening in the whole company using those numbers. Everything needs to be data driven. If that is happening, if the company is data driven, then only you will get the right resources, and you will get to experience how to develop the best models and make sure that the models are being utilized in the best possible way. One more thing which needs to be done at this point is to make sure that if it's a new product, or if it's a completely new, even from the technology perspective, they need to know exactly how the marketing are doing what campaigns, and how do those campaigns are improving the overall customer behavior or adding value to the customer's whole experience with the product. And based on these numbers, since everything is going to be data driven, the technology team can make their own improvements accordingly. So all teams need to work together based on these numbers, or based on the decisions they make. So they need to make sure that everything is consistent throughout the organization, be it big, be it small. So summarizing a little bit of what I've been talking about, this is a very famous curve. Whenever you Google customer lifecycle, you'll see this curve. But what I've done here is I've plotted down the different models which I've been using in the past, or which you can use in your organizations or in your setup. So the easiest one, which I think are the easiest, but they are a little bit tricky too, are the behavior and the lifecycle segmentation. You can build a behavior and lifecycle segmentation based on even with a very less amount of data you have. These kind of models, these are basically just segmentation. You just need to make sure that you're only giving in the right variables. If you give in too much extra information, the clusters are going to be more interlinked together, which is not a good quality to have in the behavior segmentation. And then it's also easier to maintain. So for example, if you're talking about a B2B organization, you see exactly where your SMB customers lie, or where your enterprise customers lie. it's also a very good step as a first, I do it, when I'm doing something, I just give it all of the customers and identify. So the first level of clustering, it shows you so much information, like it clubs into specific clusters, and then you see behaviors coming out of it. So, and these behaviors are not something which already. They're not, something which are already eminent or completely hidden in your base. You might see a big chunk of subscribers who are high value, but they've not been tagged as high value. Or you might also see a big chunk of customers, like retail. You'll see that these are the customers who are showing the same, spend pattern. Like these are the customers who are buying shoes as well as accessories. So there are a lot of insights would get generated by simple business behavioral segmentation. Then there are a lot of forecasting and proactive models that you can make: churn prediction, high to low, low to high, product usage, device prediction, of what kind of device the customer is using, especially in the telecommunication domain. You can also add like quality of sale model here. So, and these prediction models need to be very concise based on the business objective. Business objective is super important here. Every single model is going to be giving you a very different output if your business objective needs to be changed. So the list, these are just some of the lists. This can go on and on based on your company, what you're looking for, how you want to improve the customer experience. And then my favorite, the product recommendation engine, it not only gives you the upsell, the best high level product, it also gives you a downsell for the churn customers, the customers who are currently on a higher bundle or a higher package. You want to give them a lower package just to make sure they stick to the network. But it also gives you a cross sell. So like the example I gave, I'm more into horror movies, but maybe I might change into a comedy genre as well. So that's how the recommendation engine works. Like you find the most relevant products based on what the other customers are doing and what you yourself are doing. And then lastly is the social network analysis. Social network analysis are complicated, and they're also they actually the prereq is to get abused infrastructure too, and obviously more specialized data scientists too. But they give you information about, especially in the large companies, which information you cannot get out from any other models, like your communities, your queen bees. You can identify which are churn hubs just based on the social network analysis. And based on this, you'll see that the higher you go up, the more business value these models create. And obviously, the more complex they become, it's harder to maintain them too. But it's not something which, you can't live without social network analysis, or it totally depends upon your business objective, what you need to do, and then pick the right model, the right way to do it. That is it. I think I'll hand it over to Jenny.
Hi, wonderful. That was such a great presentation. Thank you so much. We have a handful of questions that people have submitted. And if you have other questions, please be sure to throw them into Q&A and I'll tee them up. So first is, you walk through a lot of different ways to be able to aggregate and create different data models. How do you actually recommend, or what advice would you give to be able to communicate and convey that data and insights to a non-technical person?
So it's something which we've learned the hard way, because once you're a data scientist, you just so much invested into numbers and into algorithms that once you start talking to a business user, you can't just bombard them like, this is the precision, this is the recall, this is the confusion metrics. So the best way to do it is to go back to the business objective and then use the words that the business normally uses. Like for example, in my case, I would say top predicted bins of churn subscribers. For me, that's basically those subscribers who are generating the highest score and coming in the top bins, which are more likely to go dormant. But to a business user, I'm going to use a different line. I'm going to say that these are the set of subscribers out of the total customer base we have, who have the most propensity or the highest probability to go dormant or to leave your customer base. they don't understand bins, or they won't understand the numbers as such, as you need to tell them exactly what they will understand based on the terminology they use. Similarly, if you're talking to a CXO or a CMO, all they care about is engagement levels, the number of customers engaged, revenue. They don't really care about accuracies. They don't really care about the algorithms. So you told them in their time that this is the revenue generated right now, and this is the expected revenue that we can generate based on this implementation.
Sure. So then flip it. If you are a marketer and you're lucky enough to either have a data scientist on your team, or you're collaborating with a data scientist within your organization, what are some tips that you would give that marketer to be able to get better alignment and stronger communication with their data scientist? Because they can't many times flip their language to be more technical. Like, you have the ability to flip it to speak more of the business jargon. What tips would you give them?
So it's more like the business objective comes from the marketing team, right? So the business objective is something which is something common between the two teams altogether. But right now, since like 10 years ago, I would have had more challenges explaining what a data scientist team does. But right now, there's a lot more awareness, and there's a new terminology, which is business analytics, where the marketing teams are doing their own analytics too. So they actually are more interested in the data science portion too. I've received so many questions from people from around the globe, that how do we, we have a complete marketing background, but how do we run a Python code? How do we do SQL? So at this, like right now, it's even more, people are more into data science. So it's easier for them to understand it more. And then again, when you, even as a data scientist, there's no harm in explaining them exactly how a model works. Like, to explain them that this is how I predicted it, plot a graph, show them this is how it got predicted, or these is how the slope goes, versus even in a random forest, you can show them that this is what a tree looks like. It's overwhelming, but you'll see the percentages, splitting up together. And they are so data driven that they get that too. So it's more like, how I'm interested in marketing, how they are using my model, and versus how they interpret what the model is doing.
Sure. Great tip. So if you were to give advice to a marketer who is hiring a data scientist for their team, what advice would you give them as far as finding a good candidate?
So I think if a marketing team is hiring a data scientist team, they would expect the data science team, that specific data scientist, to do a lot more than build models. The data scientist is also going to be in charge of the ETL. The data scientist is also going to be in charge of converting the external data sources into actual, an analytical layer. The data scientist is also going to be responsible of visualization. So the marketing, the hiring manager needs to look into, even if the data scientist is not a PhD, in a machine learning specific role, if the data scientist has relevant experience in managing a complete data pipeline on his own, starting from connecting the right sources to building a model, be it Python, be it R, and then visualizing it, in Looker, Tableau, whatever tool the person gets, and then making sure that the visualization is as much descriptive, even if the data scientist is not there in that meeting, the marketing team understands exactly what's happening in the dashboard. That's what they need to look for in that data scientist. And at this point, I think it's a mix of all different fields. It's a BI developer, a visualization expert, and someone who's expert in Python or good coding techniques.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I did the presentation at the very beginning of today, and it actually laid out all the different roles. If each person were to have a different role or function within your BI team, all the different roles you would need in order to have a really fully staffed up data team. And it's quite a few people. So you're right, if you're only going to have one, they need to be very well rounded to be able to do that. So last question, Maria, if the marketers here want to continue learning more about the specifics of models, where should they go? What kind of education or training is available online that you would recommend?
So I know there are a lot of different available certifications, or universities are offering online, classes for specific roles, but the marketing the person needs to know exactly how much into data science does the person needs to go into, because it's more like, even me being in this field for 12 years, I still don't know all of the data science. Like, I'm still learning something new every single day. So the first question for me, for them, I would ask, like, how much do you want? Do you want to just do, a simple Python code, some statistics in R, or do you actually want to build, an SNA, or, a big, a prediction model or a churn framework? And based on that, my recommendation would be that there are a lot of schools and a lot of online courses, which also have a lot of course materials from Ivy schools like John Hopkins and even IBM and all these different companies. They have a very good material on that, and they give you a little bit of, introduction to that, if this is for intermediate data scientist or a beginner data scientist. And I always route them towards them. Another very good is DataCamp. But again, the problem with DataCamp is that you need to have a lot of time, because it starts from absolutely scratch and then build it up, to the actual what we need. One more thing which they can do is how I actually learn new stuff is that in our day-to-day role in our in our work, in our jobs, we face a lot of different questions, like, for example, how do we do this? How do we do that? And if the person is very much enthusiastic into data science, they can just actually note all of those questions and then start something on their own, when they're in the spare time. And that's what I do too. I just, pick up the question, like, what if we have this, or what if we have that kind of model, and when you get time, you have the business objective right there. You're sitting on top of the data. All you need is, run an open source Python code or R, and then start testing it. I think that's the best way to learn it. And you'll get so many questions, like all these online platforms like GitHub, Stack Overflow. You just Google one question and you'll have millions of, search results with actual code, working code. And you just start off from there. I think that's the best way to do it.
I love it. Trial by fire. That's been a general consensus for all of the presenters today, is like, just do it. Just jump in.
Yeah.
So, well, Maria, thank you so much. The presentation today was absolutely wonderful. And for all of the attendees, stick around, because in 4 minutes, we have Chris and Sophie from Facebook. We're going to have about a 20-minute presentation from them that we're going to watch, and then we're going to do a fireside chat to round out the day. Their presentation is around using measurement strategies around innovative and up-and-coming technology. So should be pretty interesting. But Maria, thank you so much for your presentation. It was a joy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a good day.